Okay, well, welcome everybody. I appreciate you joining us here today for a piece of your Thursday morning for today's TrenData sponsored webinar, Beyond the Data, the Science of People Analytics. A brief agenda of what we're going to cover today. First, we'll talk a little bit about TrenData, the company, and who we are. Very small, just to let you know who TrenData is. And then we'll get into the meat of the webinar. Talk a little bit to start off on the different types of data that you're dealing with in the HR and people environment, and even a little more generally, what types of data that are out there that people are crunching. And then we'll talk a little bit about the science, how you can take that big mass of data and turn it into understandable, insightful information that can help you run your workforce and your business. And we'll do a little bit to bring that back to a little high school formulation and a little nostalgia trip for everybody. We'll talk a little bit again on how artificial intelligence enhancing a platform can really take that type of science to the next level and really move this type of technology and this type of methodology forward in a accelerated fashion. And then we'll look at a practical application more through a demonstration that we'll do with our TrenData solution on how we actually are able to take information and use those various steps in the scientific process to produce insightful information. We'll leave some time at the end for questions. However, if you have questions during the presentation, if you wouldn't mind submitting them through the chat, I'll get to them all at the end as they come in. So just a quick note on who I am. I'm Tom McEwen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TrenData. Pleasure to meet you. That's my picture there, not the one on the cover. I wish I was a mad scientist, but I'm not. So let's, a little background on us. TrenData, we are headquartered in the DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth area in Richardson, Texas, which is a little north of Dallas. Our company is not quite 2 years old. We launched in May of 2017. We sell largely to corporate clients and basically any type of organization that has a workforce and a workforce that needs managing. Our solutions is AI-driven people analytics. It's a cloud-based SaaS offering, so you don't need any infrastructure on premise. It's basically a browser, and then everything is done in the cloud. Here's just a few of our clients that we have out there. We're pretty representative through most industries, so if you ever down the road think you might want to do business with TrenData and want to talk to one of our clients specific to your industry or field, we should have somebody representative to allow you to talk to them. So let's start off and talk a little bit about what types of data there are out there. The most common type of data that we deal with, particularly in the HR and finance world, is structured data. And that's data that has been pretty well organized into some kind of formatted repository. Most of the systems you're dealing with, HRIS systems, finance systems, payroll systems, those all produce what's called structured data because it's very organized and formatted. Also data that you might get from some legacy type systems like Excel, which is also, formatted, whether it's cell-based or whatever, and an Excel or a CSV, because the pieces of information are kind of bucketed into very organized groups. On the other end of that spectrum is unstructured data. Now, what that is information that doesn't fit that conventional model of a database or such, but it still could be information that you're trying to capture and make use of. You might do your performance reviews in Word and want to somehow be able to bring those into your system. You might want to also be able to capture pictures, files, JPEGs, attach those, and also possibly even voice, recorded evaluations or things like that where you might want to pick things up. That's a lot more difficult information to catch, but really the way technology has started to bring that type of information into the fold is by converting it really into what we call semi-structured data. So it's really taking that unstructured data on the right and making it somehow amenable to data processing. And the ways that this is done is, even though the type of the information is unformatted, you can format it somehow by assigning author and time stamping it, or more common is putting meta tags or tagging words in the document, like you see out on the web all the time, where something might come up, but there's a keyword that you click on, or there's a keyword that when you do a search says all these things related to football will come up. So really the types of information, I'd say if you look at the HR and finance areas, it's probably about 95% structured data and maybe about 5% semi-structured data capturing some of that other stuff. But depending as things evolve and social types of data are out there, we might be seeing more unstructured data that has to be captured in some sort of a manner. I just always like to source the information when I make it available. This actually came from an article by TechTarget, which often does a lot of good HR and technology evaluation. So let's look at the science, get beyond the data, the title of the webinar, and talk a little bit about how do we get to where this information is useful. So take everybody back to high school or even grade school before that, and talk a little about what is the scientific method. It's basically the method that scientists have used from Aristotle up through Einstein to be able to build and understand great forces of science, nature, and to this point people. So the first part is through observation or visualization. So that's being able to see what's going on and start to figure out, oh, this isn't going the right way, or why is this happening, and things like that. And we kind of take it to the next step in technology and talk about visualizing it, so you can actually see the problem in an understandable way. Step two is then formulation of some kind of hypotheses or thought as to one, what's going on, and two, what could possibly be done to affect it. The third step is then, once you've kind of thought, okay, this looks like what's causing the particular reaction, being able to test that. Okay, so can you go through and run tests? If I change this, does this happen? And then running it over multiple times to see if that is the regular reaction, and that is in fact what's happening all the time or most of the time. And once you've tested it and come through with something that's very predictable and tends to happen, you actually establish your theory, or more relevant to what we're doing is to build an algorithm or a formula. So if this is happening, I do this and I do this and I do them this amount of times, and it fixes the problem or changes the outcome to something that I want to be happening. Now, the flaw in this theory is, science is always great. You've got math and gravity and things like that, which are all, very fixed and very predictable. You do X and Y happens. As we all know, that's not the case with people or business. There are other factors that can enter into it. So you might build a formula that affects turnover, but it's probably not going to be effective 100% of the time, because people are different than apples falling out of trees. Same thing with business. You can forecast things based on growth rates and factors before, but a recession might hit, or a competitor might pop up, and things like that. So not as predictable, but very much so if you get enough data. So let's walk through the individual points, one at a time, and see how they apply to what you're doing today with your people data. So the most important thing, when we talk about visualization, is to be able to see data in a manner where you can appreciate its significance. For example, you could have a CRM or an HRIS or a payroll system, that can allow you to dump data down into an individual spreadsheet or a columnar type format. And yes, there is definitely some information there that's of use, but looking at it in a 40-page rollout report really doesn't give you the information that that'll give you the type of insights that you're looking for. Really what you need, and there's a lot of tools on the marketplace there that allow you to then take that information and formulate it into more easily understandable graphics. So as we're looking at recruiting right here, you could be looking at open recs in a pie chart, or time to fill by recruiter. These are things that you can get at a particular period of time, which we refer to as metrics. You know, what's the time to fill today? What's the status of open recs today? You know, that's the first step in visualization, and being able to get to a point where you're seeing information in a meaningful manner that might be able to help you make decisions. But the second step is when you start trying to find the patterns. So as you look back on the metric before, it tells you that Dave Butler has a lower time to fill his recs than, say, Jack Johnson. But as you go back over the time period, what you'll see is their trends are going in the opposite direction. One started you know, very lower and went higher, and the other went in the reverse direction. This ability to trend and show things forward is what we refer to today as analytics, being able to look at regular sets of metrics trended over a period of time so that you can understand where things are going. So you might, for example, see from this and suggest that, you know, Jack is going to continue to get worse and Dave is going to continue to get better, but it does not necessarily pretend to that. So you might look again on top of this as the second stage, the hypothesis. You've got, I'm sorry, my PowerPoint here seems to be bringing up some weird things, but hopefully everybody can still see and understand the presentation. So then you can look at factors that might say, you know, what are the triggers that might be affecting things? Well, am I paying Dave differently than I'm paying Jack? Or is Jack working from the office and Dave working from home? Or is one maybe on the end of his career and just looking to be an individual contributor, while one is at the beginning of their career and looking to see, you know, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. I'd like to be a manager at some time, and evaluating such things as career potential. That's just a couple of the factors you might be able to see when you start developing a hypothesis that might show in the various historical look at the data as to what has affected things. And then you look at, you know, what can actually be done to change these things. I'm just trying to fix this real quick, sorry. Microsoft is a mystery. So what can actually be done to actually change some of these things? So compensation, you have a few options. You can you know, give raises out to people. You can give targeted incentive compensation in the form of bonuses that can incent people to move forward. You can look at the various work environments, maybe allowing people to work from home, maybe some sort of maybe one environment has a co-working facility and the team working actually elevates performance, or it might be just it's a very unhealthy work environment, very stuffy, very not cohesive to performance. So a lot of things you can look at there. And then of course I talked about the career potential. What are the things you can do there? Offer training, development, maybe sit down with your key players, high performers, and map out a career path. So those are the things that you can look at in the hypothesis phase, where you're saying like, okay, here's the way your things are going. Let me look back and see if I change this, what happens? Or if I change that, what happens? So phase two, formulating what you think are the factors, is what gets you towards the next phase, which is then testing your hypotheses. So the one thing I always say that's great about working with HR people is there's always tons of data to test. I put that picture up there because I always think HR departments are like pack rats. They save everything. And that's largely due to the fact that HRIS systems have been around for so long and data just tends to accumulate in there. The problem is it doesn't get used as much for insights and formulation. But what you can do as you're looking at the visualization and then the formulation of the hypothesis, you often have a very good swath of data to do your testing from. So what you might do is go back 5 years and say, this is what I thought would happen. So if I go back and test this theory, cutting the data off as of 2014, and then modeling it out based on my hypotheses, I can actually see what I would have what my model would have projected to happen versus what actually did happen. And with that much data, you can continually go back and do this for multiple snapshots to actually run your data. It doesn't have to be in such large swaths as this 2 years. You can do it really 6 months at a time and just keep looking at what your model would have said would happen and what actually did happen, and then you can tweak it based on the actual data over the time periods. And again, also being able to layer in timed events such as what happened in the economy, what happened in your company's history, acquisitions and stuff like that. So you can actually go through and then test all your data to the point where you actually have been able to build an algorithm. And it might be different by company. It might be some combination of what's going on at your company, what's going on with different benchmarks. But they can be very simple, where it's like you just have compensation, career, and maybe tenure, where you can actually see what affects what, assign percentages to them, and then run that through the multiple different iterations that you have. But of course, the more data, the more factors you can bring in, the healthier and the more accurate the algorithm's going to be. So, rather than just having 3 factors of, age, tenure, and salary, if you had commute distance to work, which could be, definitely relevant versus where people are working. You could have salaries and compensation, not only internally, but what do they look like versus industry comparison. You could look at goals of the company and goals of the individuals. And then you can also look at, external benchmarks, bringing those in. I talked about salary, but some analytics are very involved that can bring in things like, weather in different parts of the world, which if you have a call center facility in the Philippines or Southeast Asia and the storm hits, and it's a very stormy area, do you have to factor that into your analysis as to who's going to get to work and how productive they can be and what options are available to you. So the more data back years, 5 years is better than 3, 10 years is better than 5. And the more factors you can bring to bear as to what's relevant to your people population, the better and more accurate your model is going to be. Now, what helps all of this, and it's kind of as I move from theoretical to practical and bringing technology into it, is being able to put all of this onto some kind of a platform that can do all this analysis and give you all of these things. The first is to be able to go out and gather all that type of data, whether it is internal data, external data, structured data, unstructured data, to get everything you need into one place in the system where you can do that holistic analysis. And then also something that can build and trend the metrics, as we talked about, into analytics. So where you can able to input your formulas, what do you consider turnover? What do you consider absenteeism, planned versus unplanned? Recruiting success, are you talking about just filling seats? Or are you talking about bringing in leaders? All of those things that a system can do and bring in and build those formulas, incorporate financial data, and give you a cost and a benefit of being able to change things. And then, of course, predicting out into the future. So it's like, where are things going? What am I able to do to change them? And just having a platform, but then adding the AI component to it, not only allows you to continually run that multiple times so that you can actually continually get iterations of the process, But what AI adds, other than automation, is a corrective capability. So as you go through this and you find out whether it's a recruiting process or a performance process, if something keeps hitting a dead end, an AI engine can actually correct that for you. Or if you know, there's a word difference, for example, you know, performance versus success or something, again, that can pick up those words and actually block them together where you're actually getting something that's meaningful, to where you get to the point where it's not only just setting up models for you, but actually doing the prediction and the prescription for you, to where you actually are out then at the point where you're just getting answers as opposed to having to run manual scenarios yourself. So data, science, and then technology getting you to the promised land. That being the case, I wanted to move just a little from the theoretical and just show a little bit about you know, what this could look like from a solution standpoint inside of a system. So I'm going to do a quick demo of the TrenData system before I go back and answer questions. So let me just move out of here, and hopefully everybody can still see my screen. So here's a typical example of what you might look at within an analytics tool. TrenData is, of course, the leading for AI-driven predictive analytics. But here you've got a few metrics on your dashboard, and you can decide what's relevant to you. You know, this is a main dashboard that has things like cost per hire, how many employees the organization has, in order to be able to bring the financial significance home. You can assign a revenue per employee. And then you can look at more granular stuff, such as you know, where your hires are coming from. So let's kind of look at that. But first, talk about, you know, where's the data coming from. So it's important to have as open a capability to import data as possible, because there are many systems. There's a lot of legacy data. There's a lot of external data. So TrenData is very open in that it can build an API pretty much to any data source that's out there, whether it's HR systems, finance systems, sales systems, as well as being able to bring in data that can augment your internal data, whether it's survey information of employees' engagement or survey information of why people left. Also allowing you to compare benchmarks, you know, what's your turnover versus the industry. You might go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics for that. Or what's your, how are you paying your people versus the industry? And we'll go into that in a little more detail. So once you bring that data in, you can also incorporate high-level financial data, if you like, to be able to calculate what is it exactly the cost of things that you're doing is having. So, and you can also look at multiple dashboards. You might have one main dashboard. You might have one with recruiting data in it. You might have one that highlights all of your financial data, talent data, organizational data, you know, or survey data. And then you can decide which ones you want to put on the main dashboard. Let's kind of start from here with, just to keep it simple, the fact that you have different metrics on the dashboard. Let's take a quick look at hiring. So right now, this is a snapshot from the most recent upload of data. Shows that currently I get about 37% of my new hires from job boards, whereas I get maybe second most is from LinkedIn. That's in my most recent, if I'm looking at data real time, or this might be just last month. Let's take a look analytically to feel out that part of the process and see if that's a pattern that has been going on regularly. So this takes you a look back over the last year and shows you that most of your individual hires are coming from job boards. You can look at that in terms of actual numbers, or if it's, you know, you're a really large organization, you want to just look at percentages. You can still see pretty regularly about 40% of your hires are coming from job boards. You can go back over a larger time span if you have that data and look at it maybe over years. And again, that pattern seems to be true. But what else can you glean from this data? You know, just getting a person in the door is not necessarily a successful hire. But since you brought in data from all of your ecosystem, what other factors do you have in there that you can actually filter and see, you know, where maybe you're getting your best hires for. So what you can actually do is take a look at that data filtered by a number of different ways, one of which could be performance. So for example, I have a large history of performance reviews on my population. I might want to look at the people who've scored high on my performance reviews historically and see if I can tell where they've come from. Well, you can see in the current year, it's still job boards is leading, or the most recent year, it's still job boards leading it. But as things have trended over history, people who've come from job boards have tended to fall off, where it's more LinkedIn and then second employee referrals, which are actually the places where I'm getting my best hires from. So maybe in my planning and my insights and building my algorithms, I start to think maybe I factor a little more effort and possibly finances into bringing on these high performers who are coming primarily from LinkedIn and employee referrals rather than going out to the job board community. You can also do a little more analysis into the future, but we'll use turnover for that, since that's kind of the one we were talking about. So for example, this is a trended analytic, which is telling me my turnover by performance for the last 6 months. And I can see that there's an alarming trend in that high performers have started to really, high performer turnover has started to really excel. So I might want to drill down and take a look at that a little more closely. So, and maybe over the year, I might want to go through more than just 6 months and look over a whole year. And I can see, yeah, in fact, I have started to get more high performer turnover as the year went on. We talked a little bit about being able to calibrate with the outside environment. So I might want to look, has anything, you know, happened during this time period that might have caused this increase? So I can bring in this events overlay, and it shows that we did do an acquisition not too long ago in the company, and it seems to have not really had an immediate effect, but possibly down the road, it really did start to have an effect with high performers. And it might be the way that the acquisition was handled. For example, if a new layer of management came in, it might start to have had an effect on your high performers, to the fact where, well, I'm not going to be able to move up, and now we're fat on managers. I'm not going to be able to move up the line as I thought I was going to be when I hired on here a year or two ago. So that's kind of the formulation possibly of a hypothesis. Maybe I'm not paying them enough. Maybe there's other factors. So let's go into the predictive modeling and see if that's something we can actually bear out to be true. So as I move into my predictive model, I can see turnover is anticipated to continually decline and then kind of level off here, but at a very unhealthy rate. 5.5% monthly turnover, if you aggregate by the year, is about 60% turning over your workforce every year, which I'm sure is not something most companies would want. I can also, again, filter that by performance and show the even more hurtful part of it is it's the high performers that are going to stay high, even higher than the general population. So let's see, based on my hypothesis and what I think might be changeable factors, what I can test and maybe prove out to be true. So from here, I'm going to flip over from, this is an individual tab showing everybody in the current view. And this is a summary tab, which kind of shows some high-level information company-wide, such as breaking down things I'm doing right now and the effect of them, productivity loss, number of employees, and such. And if I press on the modeling button, what this allows me to do is to look at some factors that I can actually change that might affect these trends. You know, one is, of course, I could be, I could, for example, might give people higher salaries. So what would happen if I gave, on an average, a $5,000 raise to everybody in the company and update that to, say, $136,000? Okay, as you can see, turnover went down just a blip, maybe like 0.2%, and high performer turnover really didn't go down much at all either. So this is a 1,000-person company, 5,000 per employee. I just spent $5 million and got very little in return for it. So maybe I'll back that one out and not do that one. The company looks like it also has a pretty robust policy for letting people work from home or work remotely. A little over a third of the employees are actually working from home. What if I increase that 10%, maybe let 45%? You know, it's debatable whether your company can actually allow to do that. But if I do that, the 45%, I could see that the top line turnover number did start to go down. It went down about 1.2% and continues to go down. But it didn't have really the effect. It did have some effect, but not the real effect on the high performers. It's still way above even at the end of this trend than it was, 6 months ago. So depending on how much that costs me and if the company is able to do it, perhaps I will leave that in place. But look at this third factor. We talked a little bit in our observations as, possibly the acquisition is something that has been spurring high performers to leave. But look at this factor here. 7% of my high performers are in any kind of professional development. So these are the people who are bringing in the most to the company, and we're not rewarding them. Maybe we're rewarding them financially, but we're not rewarding them saying, hey, you're gonna progress with the company, offering them any kind of career. So let's get aggressive with that one. So for example, it's at 7.3 now. What if we doubled it to 15? Aha, yes, that is really what our high performers are looking for. And what that has begun to do is drive down the high performer turnover even more so than the overall turnover rate. So possibly being able to take the money that we might have put into raises and put it into high performer training might be the way to actually increase high performer turnover. Now, you might still have some doubts about that, and you might say, well, why didn't the salary part work? So TrenData also has a natural language engine which allows you to just type in questions such as, why not give bigger raises? Okay, and what that's going to do is take me to somewhere on our compensation front, which is telling me, well, looks like in just about every category, I'm paying my people above the industry averages. So using that analysis, although I'm sure all of your people and your high performers would be very happy to get more money, that's not the reason they're leaving right now, apparently based on the models and what kind of data we have in the system. So just a quick look there, kind of giving an idea of what you can do practically to take that theoretical approach, use your data, visualize it, hypothesize, test, and then formulate your results to where it gives you a real benefit to your organization. So with that, I am going to drop back out into the presentation and open it up for questions to see if I have any questions that have come up. Okay, we have a few. One of the questions was, what factors do you use to go into the prediction of the high performers? A lot of it was based on regression analysis, where we actually took what had happened historically. We calibrated that with the pay information and events, similar to what we talked. What we do at TrenData is we take a lot of benchmark data, which is company and industry data, where we actually are crunching it regularly. So we can actually augment a client's data with what we've been able to come up with our individual crunching of data through clients that let us anonymize the data and do exercise on it. So we've got a big file of hundreds of thousands, probably millions of records, where we do testing as well on top of what will actually run on your data. So the scenario I just presented is actually based on some real data that we have in the system. So good question, good question. Next question here is, does TrenData offer consulting services to actually help with that? Absolutely. You might want to just buy a basic system that you load your data into and visualize and do minor stuff. But most of our clients tend to engage us with a consulting engagement where they want us to come in, look at their data, help formulate and build different models. The model I built there for turnover is not the only predictive model we have. We have ones that run on absenteeism, effects of that, as well as being able to do more calculations based on who you hire, how you hire, and where you hire them as well. So yeah, a lot of that's a consulting engagement, but I don't want to frighten people off, because you can get started, very basically and evolve into that. So a very good question. Have another question. Are the slides available? Yes, we can make the slides available. Also, as I said, this presentation is being recorded, so we'll actually make the whole presentation available on our website, where we can actually you can actually download it and share it with your colleagues. Anything else? I think that's pretty much all I had. Yeah.
We have a couple of questions from Jesse and Joanne in the
Okay.
chat.
Okay, give them.
So Jesse Pope wants to know what statistical method is working behind the scenes in the modeling function.
Yeah, okay, similar to what I talk. It's partly based on a regression analysis that we do on the data, as well as being able to factor in at different points any external or internal events. But it's pretty much regression analysis where we target individual groups and build retention indexes. So for example, someone in development in San Jose might be a greater flight risk than the same person in maybe Mobile, Alabama, where there's not as big of a competition for technology brains. So regression analysis and retention index are probably, at least for some of these, the two bigger ones that we put in place. Okay, what else?
Yeah, so Joanne has a couple of really good questions here. Are the TrenData dashboards a fixed number of solutions, or are the dashboards customizable for clients?
Absolutely. The dashboards are totally, we like to use the word configurable, because you can build whatever dashlet you want based on information. Probably the only way it might customizable a little bit is if you want a really arcane formula that's not been used before. But yes, for one state, the dashboards can all be configured to the individual, and individuals within companies can have different dashboards. Absolutely.
Okay, and then one more final question is, and I'm not sure I quite understand this term, or it says, can you do list roll or structural equation modeling?
I believe so. Structural equation is, I think, where you can actually enter in the formula, but whoever asked that question, maybe if they can qualify that a little bit more, but where you actually enter in the formula for the particular data set you want and have it built based on just you entering a formula and not doing the analysis.
Right, yeah,
So
she's clarified now to test your models, that would be for. Or any regression testing of formulas and hypotheses.
Oh yeah, that's basically what we do historically, and with our own test data sets we have there. We test them multiple times based on regression methods and stuff that we built, and they tend to evolve. And we do, going forward with clients who build predictive models, is we test them every quarter to make sure they're still relevant.
Great. Okay, one final question has just popped up. Of course, we have a little time for more, but can TrenData pull data from multiple systems within a company?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, multiple systems is the biggest benefits of the intelligent data gathering. Allows you to aggregate, so you can pull your HR data from SAP, your finance data from Oracle, your recruiting data from iCIMS, and any other sport, and it'll pretty much merge all that information onto the platform. So yeah, that's actually the big benefit, because really most companies don't have one data source where everything's in. Actually, the typical company might have upwards of 10 different data sources where they want to bring in. Also with probably a ton of legacy data, which they just might want to upload from spreadsheets. Okay, anything else?
Sounds
All
great.
right, well, if there are no more questions, if anybody wants to follow up with me directly, here's my contact information as well as my handles on Twitter and my own website and TrenData. If you want more information on us, just send it to marketing@trendata.com and we'll get back with you. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at TrenData Inc. And our website is TrenData.com. So I appreciate everybody's attendance. I know your time is valuable, and we really appreciate you spending some of it with us. So thank you again, and we hope to hear from you, see you on another webinar, or possibly do some business with you. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.